Okay, so I'm going to do something completely different today. As you know, my book is called Grandma's Buttons, and it's a story of my late husband's grandmother who was blind and had Alzheimer's disease. I would like to take you on a journey through her eyes. I've never done this before, and so I'm kind of excited. I've thought a lot about it. I knew her from the time I was 17, and the stories that she told are all embedded in my soul. Because of all the years she lived with me, I know her stories. So I would like to become Mary Wellman for a bit. So I'm going to talk as if I am her, and I'm going to tell you her story as she told it to me. Mary Wellman was born in the year February 17th in 1900. I love that I was born in 1900 because I always know that I'm the same age as the year. At a young age, I recognized that, and I talked about being the same age as the year my entire life. I grew up in Illinois with wonderful parents. My mom and dad, my father worked on the railroad, on the Wabash Railroad, and I was so proud of my dad. My mother was a great cook and taught me the things that I needed to know as I grew up. I was the eldest daughter of over two other sisters, so three girls. My sister Irene was the youngest and Lucille was the middle girl. I helped to take care of them. I only have one complaint about my childhood, and that was that I had brown hair. And my sisters had blonde hair. Now, my mother believed that girls who were back in those days were called a brunette were only allowed to wear blue. And girls that were blonde were allowed to wear pink. Well, pink is my favorite color. I want to wear pink. Why can't I wear pink? Oh no. Girls with brunette hair must only wear blue. Girls that are blonde can wear pink. It frustrated me for many years, and as I grew older, I remedied that. I wore a lot of pink. Then as time went on, I remember when I was 17 years old, and I wanted a beau. That's a boyfriend. I couldn't wait to get my first beau. And I met this young man. He was a wonderful young man. And he delighted me. I remember laughing and being giddy. I remember how fun it was to have that time with him. And we had sometimes sneak off and go sit for hours in a park and talk about all the things that we dreamt about and all the things we wanted to do in our lives. I had plans. I was going to do a lot with my life. Then time went on, and I met and married my husband. Now, he wasn't the very best husband. As a matter of fact, we never did have our own home. We lived with his parents. Now, his mother and father were nice people. His mother was a bit stern, but his father was a sweet, kind man. My husband never really had a job. I was the one that supported us. I worked in the 5 and 10 cent store. I earned the money for our entire marriage. He often went to the bars and would come home drunk. That wasn't the life that I really wanted, but it was the life that I had. Then at age 27, I found out I was pregnant. Oh, what joy this gave me. I got to know that I was going to have a child. I dreamt about what this child was going to be like. I dreamt about how wonderful he or she would be. You see, back in those days, we didn't get to know who the baby was or whether we had a boy or a girl until they were born. That day finally came in 1927. My son was born. He ended up being my only child that I was able to have, but he was everything in my life. I loved being a mom. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. But was this the life I wanted for my child? Did I really want him to have the example of a father that never worked? Did I really? I mean, my husband wasn't abusive. He just didn't help at all. He wasn't a bad person. He just didn't had any desire to grow our family and to help our family. Thoughts went through my mind. What should I do? I turned to the one person that I trusted most, my father-in-law. You see, my father-in-law was a kind man, and I turned to him and said, what should I do? He will not go to work. He will not do the things he needs to do. I don't think I should stay in the marriage. And the answer came back. You need to leave him. My father-in-law had given me permission to leave. I immediately did so. And there was a separation. The separation of my son and I from his father. And he didn't see his father very much over the years to come. I gave all that I had to being a mom. At that point, while I was a single mom, I was a hairdresser. Well, back then we were called beauticians. And I worked in a salon. And then in 1942, the war broke out. Now, I had seen lots of things in my life. I'd seen the invention of cars, and I was the first one in the city of Decatur, Illinois, who had a Ford car. I owned an automobile. I was the very first woman that owned one in my town. Boy, the men liked me because they liked my car. But my parents were aging by now. It was going on to the Depression. It was hard times. I had to think, okay, I'm a single mom and I need to raise my child. And now my parents need my help. So I need to take them in. But there was no Social Security back then. We didn't have Social Security help with the finances. So I needed to support my parents and my son. I have an idea. I think because I have this skill and now the salon is closed down because of the Depression, no one could afford to come to the salon for their hair. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to travel from home to home and do people's hair. I've been very successful. I've been able to make a living for my son and my parents. I've been able to survive the Depression as a single mom. Time goes on. And when my son was 13 years old, I met a new man. I, by this time, had my own salon. And the salesman in the salon, or the hair care salesman, would bring in products to my salon every day. He would he would purposely forget to bring something that I needed so he could come the next day. And secretly, I was hoping he'd forget something so he would come the next day. He was lovely. He was a kind, gentle man. He was a hard-working man. I was just so in love. What a wonderful experience this was for me. One little challenge. He had a daughter. I'd never raised a girl before. She was 11. My son was 13. It was a little bit awkward for both of them. But this girl was very needy, and I wasn't sure what to do with her. I did struggle through the years that we finished. Her mother had passed, so I needed to be a mother to her, and it was a struggle. But I was able to do it. My husband and I, after we got married, we had opened different businesses. We bought a laundromat and we worked hard. We folded so many clothes. It was fun, but it was a lot of work. Then we got a restaurant. Oh my goodness. Don't open a restaurant. If you open a restaurant, you're going to come home smelling like the food. I didn't like that too much, but we worked hard and we were successful. We went on to buy a few other businesses and worked them. And then time went on. My son was able to get married. My he married a lovely woman, and my grandchildren started coming. Oh, I love being a grandma. I love being a grandma. The first grandchild was born on New Year's Day. I'll never forget that day. It was glorious. And then the second one came in April, and the third one came a year later, and then the last one came 10 years later. It was the best part of my life. In 1969, my husband passed. We had had a wonderful life together, and I was so happy that I'd had him in my life. My grandchildren were growing up and finding their own life. I was doing well, but my eyesight was going. I had had problems with glaucoma, and I couldn't see very well anymore. But I was still driving a car. I really like driving my car. I don't want them to take my car away. But time went on. I had to move out of my apartment into another home, and my car was sitting outside. And I got in my car one day, and I knew they were going to take my car away soon. So I just sat in that car. I just sat there and wanted to feel the feeling of my own car. But I knew the next day they were going to come and take my car because I could no longer see to drive it. But I did like the feeling of it. Then time went on, and I was able to move into a lovely place, a place where I had friends. It was a assisted living for seniors. By this time, my sight was completely gone. I had had the opportunity to go to Braille Institute, and I learned how to crochet, and I made beautiful things for my great grandchildren and for my grandchildren, and I did lots of things with my hands. I loved that I got to learn those things. But in this home, I found my best friend. I'll never forget Ida. She and I did everything together. We liked the same things. We laughed together. We did many, many good things. They had concerts and activities. Every day we'd come out down for lunch and then for breakfast and then lunch and then dinner. So I had a good life there. One day I went to take my medications. I was taking 8 different medications and they got confusing. All of a sudden, I can't figure out which bottle is which. I think I'll just take more of them. I'm not sure if I took them, but just in case, I better take them. They found me on the floor. I didn't show up to dinner that day. They came looking. I was passed out from an overdose of the medication. Not by choice, just by pure circumstance. I was put into the hospital, and then from there, things changed again. After they revived me and I was doing well, they decided I was no longer able to live in this home because we had our own little apartment and we had to be able to take care of ourselves. So I was put into a convalescent home. I didn't like it there. It was horrible. I was blind. I couldn't see where I was. I didn't know the voices I was hearing. Where's Ida? I don't know where Ida is. I want to find Ida again. I couldn't find Ida. Why have they got me tied down to this bed? I need to go to the bathroom. Why am I tied up? And I just cry all the time. I don't want to be tied to this bed. I had a visit tonight from my grandson and his wife. They saw me in this state of crying. I want to get out of this bed. I need to go potty. No one's answering. I'm yelling for them to come. A few hours later, I hear this voice say to me, Grandma, we're going to break you out tonight. We're going to take you home with us. Oh, yes, I really want to go home with you. I don't want to be here. Started a new journey. They've told my family I only have 2 months to live, and I get to live my last 2 months with family, with my grandson and his family, and the great grandchildren. I am so happy at this turn of events. It means so much to me. I'm now at home with family. They had to potty train me because I was so used to using the diaper. But now I'm potty trained and I'm doing well and I'm back on my walker. I can go to and from the bathroom anytime I want. I'm feeling much more healthy. They took away those medications because I didn't really need them to begin with. I am a happy person. It's Christmas Day and they've given me a whole case of Lifesavers candy, my favorite. I'm sitting on the couch and I'm thoroughly enjoying my candy. No one's around, so they don't know I've eaten the whole container. It kind of made me sick to my stomach, though. Probably not a good idea. My life is different here, and I'm happy. I didn't die after 2 months. I lived another 12 years. My memory went away, and sometimes I didn't know who my family was, but I knew I was loved. And that's my story.
Oh, wow, Geri. Oh, gosh, did you take us into that story? I can see the point where you made the decision to take her home. I can see why. Wow.
I have to compose myself. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Honey, will you get me a Kleenex?
Wow.
One of the few times I ever saw my husband cry was that night. When I met Steve, I was 17 and I was going to beauty school at the time. And grandma had already done, she had done years of hairdressing. So he took me over to her house one day and we spent about 3 hours and she told me the entire history of the permanent wave. She remembered everyone whose hair she burned off, who invented the permanent wave, how it was done. She remembered how many people, what happened to the people who invented them, and how many people's hair she had burned off. It was so interesting, and she talked about the industry, and I was at that time I just started beauty school, and so it was super. It was a connection to her that I just always had. I loved her from the minute I met her, and always I was very close to both of Steve's grandparents, grandmothers. I met her just 2 weeks after she lost her second husband, and so I never got to meet him, but I heard all about him. I knew him as if I had met him because she talked so much about him. So
Wow.
so it was okay. I mean, I've been thinking about this for a couple of days of how I wanted to share her journey.
It was
As
such a powerful rendition, and I think it's because you were connected to her on a soul level. I can't explain it. I just feel like your connection was much more than just a granddaughter-in-law, so to speak. You were connected on a very, very spiritual level.
Yeah, we were.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because
Incredible story.
when you told this story, you were literally walking her story.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. I felt all those years that she lived with us, on the nights that she couldn't sleep or something was bothering her, she would sit and tell me stories. And I listened to them over and over and over again. And that's why I had to write my book, because it was 25 years later that I actually published. I started writing it 10 years after she died, just because
Oh, are you serious?
I kept getting this prompting. You need to write that book. You need to write that book. And I thought, well, I don't really want to talk about what I did. I like what I did, but I did I didn't want it to be about me taking care of her. I wanted it to be about her. And it's a little bit hard to do that when you have to talk about the disease and about the daily things that you do.
Mm.
But um, that's basically what I was thinking about doing for my TED talk, is something like that. Um, when I
Yeah, yeah, and just the way you did it, talking from the perspective of grandma is so powerful. I can't see it being done any other way, because what I could hear from the story is the voice of all these elderly people who are put in retirement homes by families, and what they have to endure sometimes if they don't have the right facilities, the right care, just the right to go to the toilet and be forced to wear a diaper because nobody's bothered to come and take you to the loo.
Right.
We don't think about these things. I know that when my mom, towards the end, she hated having to wear those diapers, hated it. She would rather we help her. And Ruth will remember, because Ruth was with me the last time I was in Zim. We would carry her and take her to the loo and back. And she was fine so long as she told us in time. But I can imagine if somebody's put in a facility where people are busy, they can't really check, they're not there 24/7 to really take care of the needs of the people that are there, how frustrating it must be for a human being at the end of your life as well.
And she was always so happy. She was like, we would go to visit her. She would call us up and say, they're having such and such for lunch today. And we get to have guests. So please come and join us for lunch. And we'd sit there at the table with these old people, and they'd all get all excited that we were there. And to her, that was like, she was always happy. And I had to meet all her friends every single time, and which was great. It's just such a joy to see that. So then when we go in that hospital room, or that convalescent home, and she's laying in the bed and she's crying, please untie my hands, I have to go potty. It's something in my brain just said no. And I mean, and Steve just didn't even know what to do with it. He had no idea what to do with it until I said, let's take her home.
Yeah.
And that conversation happened. I had to make some decisions. I had to beg my father-in-law to let me take her home, and he finally said yes. And so I don't know if I ever told you, but the day of my book launch, my father-in-law is a very private, quiet guy. He hardly says much, and he's a really nice man. I've always been close to him. He's quite ill right now, so I've been watching for him. He's 93.
Right.
But when I had grandma, I had her wedding rings and all of her stuff. And I had always loved her wedding rings. So when I got married to Joseph, I gave them to him when she passed, and he gave them to my mother-in-law. And I knew she wasn't wearing them. So I asked her, Mom, could I have grandma's wedding rings to use for my wedding to Joseph? Because that's the kind of rings I wanted, because they were old.
Yes.
And that's what I liked. And so she said, oh, Geri, I gave them to Florence. This is the stepdaughter. By the time grandma hated this girl by the time she was an adult. And I thought, she goes, I gave them to Florence and she probably hawked them. I'm like, oh my.
Oh.
So the day of my book launch, everybody's here and we had a really nice party. And my father-in-law calls me over to the couch and goes, Geri, I want to talk to you. He goes, Geri, I found something in a file cabinet. It had
Oh.
been in a file cabinet with Florence's name on it for 25 years.
Are you serious? You lift your hand, we can't see.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So you got the rings.
Gave me her rings for my book launch, which I just was so touched.
Goodness.
Wow.
It was like,
A
it was,
gift.
it was already such an exciting day because, I was excited that the book was doing so, it was selling so fast. And I was, international bestseller by 5 o'clock, #1 international bestseller by 5 o'clock, and 5 countries. And I was like, my head was kind of spinning because I didn't expect that. And then Dad comes and we're having this party. I'm having a great time. I'm not that much attention, you know what I'm saying? Then he gives me, I almost melted right there. It's like, I just almost melted that he gave me that. He said, Geri, I really want you to have these. They're supposed to be for you. And I've worn them ever since. But isn't that nice?
So they were supposed to come to you for sure.
Yeah.
They were supposed to come to you. Florence never got them.
Never got them, so she didn't knock them. And my mother-in-law was, after Steve passed away, she had such a hard time with his loss that she just didn't remember. She had passed away about 4 years, no, about 7 years after Steve passed away. Mom passed, right after Joseph and I got married. And so she just didn't remember. But
Wow.
yeah,
Oh, that is just so nice.
it was.
Beautiful.
That is a beautiful ending to your story with Grandma.
Yeah.
She must have energetically have those rings lost and just tucked away somewhere for the right moment.
She would have wanted Florence. One time Florence came when she was still living in her apartment. Florence came to visit her, and she was totally blind by this point. Florence went into her linen closet and took a bunch of linens and put them in a box in the bottom of the closet and said, give to Florence. And then all the pictures on the wall that she wanted, she wrote, give to Florence behind. Well, Grandma didn't know she was doing that because she was blind. And there was several things in the house. So when we're moving Grandma out of the assisted living place into our place, I'm like, oh, Grandma, here's a box that you have made up for Florence. She goes, I didn't make up a box for Florence.
Oh my gosh.
She goes, I don't want her to have that. And then, so we ended up we took them all out of the box. And so it was just interesting that all came about.
Oh,